The Kytharan Empire had transformed wholesale slaughter into an art form, which was quite the achievement considering most species struggled to turn genocide into anything more sophisticated than a hobby. Their hunting culture wasn't merely about killing things. Oh no, that would be too pedestrian for beings who had bioengineered themselves into living weapons. Instead, they had elevated the practice of tracking, cornering and systematically dismantling other sentient beings into what their philosophers called the purest expression of evolutionary superiority. The rest of the galaxy called it Tuesday. Nexus Station's Predator's Den Cantina served as the unofficial headquarters for this civilized barbarism, where hunters from across 3 spiral arms gathered to compare kill counts and exchange tips on the most efficient ways to terrorize lesser species. The establishment's decor reflected its clientele's refined tastes, trophy heads mounted between elegant crystal displays, each kill artistically preserved and catalogued with the sort of meticulous care most beings reserved for family photos. The bartender, a modified Vorthon with 4 arms and impressive scarification, mixed cocktails that glowed with bioluminescent additives, while discussing the finer points of prey preservation techniques. Tonight, however, even the cantina's usual atmosphere of sophisticated menace had taken on an electric quality. Word had spread that the legendary alpha hunter himself would be gracing the establishment with his presence. This wasn't just any predator. This was the apex of Kytharan hunting evolution, a being so thoroughly augmented that calling him merely enhanced was like calling a supernova bright. The alpha's pack entered with the coordinated precision that had made them famous across 17 sectors. 6 beings moved as one organism, their biomodifications creating a symphony of perfectly calibrated lethality. Neural link implants allowed them to share thoughts instantaneously, while enhanced sensory organs could detect prey from 3 systems away. Their leader stood 7 feet tall, his original Kytharan physiology so extensively modified that taxonomists had given up trying to classify what he had become. Enhanced muscle fibers provided strength that could crush titanium, while his optical implants could track 47 distinct targets simultaneously across multiple spectrums. The pack's reputation preceded them like a bow wave of terror. They had successfully hunted every known sentient species in the galaxy, except, notably, one particular newcomer that had only recently achieved interstellar travel. The Alpha found this oversight personally offensive, though he assured anyone who would listen that rectifying it would be merely a matter of scheduling convenience. Humans had burst onto the galactic scene with all the subtlety of a toddler crashing a funeral, completely unaware that they had just entered a universe where they ranked somewhere between appetizers and entertainment on the cosmic food chain. Their technology was charmingly primitive, their social structure endearingly chaotic, and their complete lack of natural defenses absolutely adorable. Most established civilizations had responded to humanity's arrival with the sort of bemused tolerance typically reserved for particularly clever pets. The Kytharans, however, viewed humans through the lens of their hunting tradition. Here was a species that had somehow achieved spaceflight despite lacking proper claws, enhanced reflexes, natural armor, or even basic telepathic abilities. They possessed no hive mind, no genetic memory, no inherited combat instincts passed down through millennia of evolutionary warfare. Instead, they seemed to bumble through the universe with nothing more than stubborn determination and an inexplicable tendency to solve complex problems by hitting them repeatedly with increasingly sophisticated tools. The Alpha found their very existence mildly insulting. How dare these soft pink creatures achieve interstellar travel when superior species had spent eons perfecting themselves for cosmic dominance? Their success felt like a cosmic joke, as if the universe itself was mocking the careful evolutionary progress of truly advanced civilization. Look at them, the Alpha remarked to his pack, his voice carrying the sort of refined contempt that could only be achieved through centuries of systematic superiority, complex cultivation. They spread across space in metal boxes, completely vulnerable, absolutely defenseless. They don't even seem aware that they're prey. His packmates shared his amusement through their neural link, their enhanced cognitive processors analyzing human behavioral patterns with the same analytical precision other species reserved for quantum mechanics. Every data point reinforced their collective assessment. Humans represented the galaxy's most pathetically easy hunt. The Alpha's optical implants swept the Cantina's patrons, cataloging threat levels and hunting potential with practiced efficiency. Mandalorian mercenaries registered as moderate challenges, while the cluster of Nexari traders barely qualified as warm-up exercises. His gaze paused, however, on a solitary figure occupying a corner booth. A human sat alone, nursing what appeared to be some sort of primitive ethanol-based beverage, completely oblivious to the predatory attention now focused in her direction. She wore simple clothing that suggested civilian status, carried no visible weapons, and displayed none of the enhanced modifications that marked serious interstellar travelers. Her posture was relaxed to the point of vulnerability, her attention seemingly focused on the Cantina's holographic entertainment displays rather than scanning for potential threats. The Alpha's enhanced cognitive processors immediately began calculating hunting scenarios, each more satisfying than the last. Here was an opportunity to demonstrate Kytharan's superiority to the entire Cantina, to showcase the effortless precision with which true predators handled prey species. The evening had just become considerably more interesting. Part 2. The challenge issued. The Alpha's approach toward the humans' table carried all the theatrical flair of a supernova announcing its intentions to a solar system, subtle as a brick through a viewport, yet undeniably impressive to those who appreciated such performance. His pack followed at precisely calculated intervals, their movements choreographed through their neural link with the sort of coordination that made professional dance troupes weep with envy. Every patron in the Cantina recognized the signs. A legendary predator had selected his prey. The human, meanwhile, continued sipping her beverage with the sort of oblivious contentment that made seasoned hunters question whether some species actually possessed survival instincts, or had simply evolved past the need for them. She glanced up as the Alpha's considerable shadow fell across her table, her expression registering mild curiosity rather than the appropriate level of primal terror. "Well, well," the Alpha announced, his voice carrying across the suddenly quiet Cantina with the resonance of someone accustomed to having his every utterance treated as profound wisdom. "What do we have here? A little lost human, all alone in the big, dangerous galaxy." The human tilted her head with the sort of polite interest typically reserved for mildly entertaining street performers. "Actually, I'm just having a drink," she replied, her tone suggesting that stating the obvious was somehow necessary for interspecies communication. "But thanks for checking." This response clearly wasn't following the Alpha's anticipated script. His enhanced cognitive processors had calculated 17 different scenarios for initial contact, ranging from immediate cowering to desperate attempts at bribery. Casual dismissal hadn't made the list, which was either a fascinating oversight in Kytharan's psychological modeling, or evidence that humans operated on entirely different behavioral parameters than the rest of known civilization. "Do you know who I am?" the Alpha inquired, his voice carrying the sort of barely contained menace that had reduced entire planetary governments to quivering diplomatic apologies. The human's eyes performed a brief visual scan that somehow managed to be both comprehensive and utterly unimpressed. "Someone who's interrupting my quiet evening," she suggested helpfully. The Cantina's other patrons began placing bets with the sort of frenzied enthusiasm typically reserved for sporting events or natural disaster. The odds heavily favored the human's survival being measured in minutes rather than hours, though a few optimistic souls wagered on whether she might last long enough to finish her drink. The Alpha's pack shared his growing bewilderment through their neural link, their collective consciousness attempting to process a social interaction that defied every established protocol for predator-prey dynamics. Their target should have been offering tribute, begging for mercy, or at minimum showing some acknowledgement that she was speaking to one of the galaxy's most accomplished killers. "I am the Alpha Hunter of the Kytharan Empire," he announced with the sort of dramatic pause that suggested orchestral accompaniment should have swelled in the background. "My pack and I have successfully hunted every sentient species in known space." "Congratulations," the human replied, raising her glass in what might have been a toast or possibly just coincidental timing. "That sounds like quite the hobby." The Alpha's enhanced facial muscles twitched in what his biographers would later describe as the first recorded instance of him experiencing genuine confusion. Calling the systematic terrorization of lesser species a hobby was like referring to stellar engineering as weekend carpentry. Technically accurate, but missing several layers of sophisticated meaning. "Perhaps," he said, his voice taking on the predatory purr that had preceded the downfall of numerous civilizations, "you would be interested in participating in a small demonstration. A traditional Kytharan hunt, just to show the Cantina what proper predators can accomplish when faced with." He paused, his optical implants performing another scan of her unremarkable appearance. Appropriate prey. The human considered this proposition with the sort of thoughtful expression most beings reserved for complex mathematical equations or particularly challenging crossword puzzles. You're challenging me to some sort of hunting competition. Indeed, the Alpha confirmed, his confidence returning as the conversation finally steered toward familiar territory. My pack against you in a controlled environment. Traditional rules, of course, though we'll make allowances for your limitations. The betting pool immediately exploded into fevered activity, with odds shifting so rapidly that several bookmakers required emergency recalibration of their computational system. The general consensus seemed to be that this wouldn't so much be a hunt as a brief educational demonstration of galactic food chain hierarchy. What exactly would I get out of this? The human asked, displaying the sort of practical concern that suggested she was at least marginally aware of basic risk assessment principles. Survival would be its own reward, the Alpha replied magnanimously, though I suppose we could make it interesting. When, if you lose, you become part of my collection. When you lose quickly, I'll make sure the process is educational for the observers. The human nodded slowly, as if genuinely considering the proposal's merits. And if I win? The Alpha's laughter resonated through his enhanced vocal cords with harmonic frequencies designed to trigger fear responses in most known species. My dear little human, that question is so charmingly optimistic that I almost feel guilty about what's going to happen to you. I'll take that as we haven't really thought that far ahead, she said, finishing her drink with deliberate casualness. All right, I accept. The Cantina erupted into the sort of chaos typically associated with major sporting events or minor military coups. Patrons scrambled to place final bets, while the Alpha's pack began their pre-hunt preparation rituals, with the ritualistic precision of beings who had turned killing into performance art. Excellent, the Alpha purred, his enhanced features displaying the sort of satisfaction that came from knowing the evening's entertainment had been settled. We'll use the Biodome Hunting Preserve standard Kytharan pack rules. You'll have access to basic tracking equipment, of course. We wouldn't want this to be completely unfair. The human stood, stretching with the casual movement of someone preparing for a pleasant evening stroll rather than a life-or-death struggle against genetically modified apex predators. That's very thoughtful of you, she said. Just the basics will be fine. As the group prepared to move toward the hunting preserve, several of the Cantina's more perceptive patrons noticed something that the Alpha's enhanced senses had apparently missed. The human's movements carried a subtle precision that suggested familiarity with violence, and her eyes held a calculating quality that seemed oddly inconsistent with her apparent helplessness. But then again, most observers were too busy placing bets to pay attention to such subtle details. Part 3. The hunt begins. The Biodome Hunting Preserve represented the pinnacle of Kytharan recreational engineering, a self-contained ecosystem spanning 12 square kilometers, complete with variable terrain, atmospheric control, and enough environmental hazards to make even experienced predators occasionally reconsider their career choices. The facility's designers had thoughtfully included dense forests, rocky canyons, artificial swamplands, and open grasslands, creating what marketing brochures cheerfully described as nature's deadliest greatest hits collection. The Alpha's pack deployed with the sort of methodical precision that would have made military strategists weep with professional jealousy. Their enhanced sensory arrays immediately began mapping the preserve's layout, while their neural link established communication protocols that could function across multiple dimensional phases. Bioscanners calibrated to detect human physiological signatures activated with soft electronic hums, while aerial reconnaissance drones launched from concealed shoulder compartments. The human, meanwhile, had accepted her basic tracking equipment with the sort of polite gratitude typically reserved for elderly relatives offering outdated technology advice. The gear consisted of primitive motion sensors, a simple communications device, and what the Kytharans generously described as elementary survival tools, essentially the sort of equipment that serious hunters used for practice exercises with particularly slow children. Remember, the Alpha announced through the preserve's communication system, his voice carrying the patronizing tone of someone explaining basic concepts to the intellectually challenged. This is a traditional hunt. You have 30 minutes to find adequate hiding spots before we begin tracking. Try to make it interesting. The human's response crackled through the communications array with barely contained amusement. Thanks for the head start.
I'll do my best not to disappoint. What happened next would later be analyzed by xenobiologists, military strategists, and philosophers across 17 star systems, though none of their theories would adequately explain the phenomenon they were witnessing. The moment the humans stepped into the preserve, she simply disappeared, not in the dramatic sense of vanishing in a puff of smoke or employing some sort of advanced cloaking technology. She merely ceased to exist within the pack's enhanced sensory parameters. Their bioscanners registered empty space where thermal imaging should have detected body heat, while motion sensors tracked nothing more significant than wind patterns through the vegetation. The Alpha's initial confidence remained unshaken. Humans were notorious for their crude understanding of stealth techniques, typically relying on hiding behind inadequate cover while producing enough noise to alert predators from 3 sectors away. This temporary disappearance was clearly just beginner's luck combined with basic environmental camouflage. Pack formation Alpha 7, he commanded through their neural link. Standard sweep pattern, full spectrum analysis. She's probably cowering behind the first large tree she encountered. His team moved through the preserve with coordinated efficiency, their enhanced reflexes allowing them to navigate difficult terrain while maintaining perfect formation. Advanced optical implants scanned through multiple light spectrums, while auditory enhancements detected everything from insect wing beats to seismic vibrations from small rodent movement. Their biomodifications had transformed them into living sensor arrays, capable of tracking prey across dimensions that most species couldn't even perceive. 20 minutes into the sweep, they had successfully located 14 different indigenous life forms, catalogued the preserve's complete atmospheric composition, and identified 17 potential hiding spots that could theoretically conceal human-sized prey. What they had not found was any trace whatsoever of their target. Perhaps she's more clever than anticipated, one pack member suggested through their shared consciousness, though his tone suggested this was less likely than spontaneous warp core combustion. Impossible, the Alpha replied, though his enhanced cognitive processes were beginning to flag anomalies in their tracking data. Humans lack the genetic modifications necessary for advanced stealth. She's simply utilizing terrain features more effectively than expected. The first indication that something had gone fundamentally wrong occurred at minute 37, when pack member designation Hunter Prime failed to respond to neural link queries. His biosignature remained active, indicating functional life signs, but his consciousness had apparently disconnected from their shared network. Investigate Hunter Prime's position, the Alpha commanded, though his voice carried the first hint of uncertainty that had crept into their mission parameters. The second pack member reached Hunter Prime's last known coordinates to discover nothing more threatening than a grove of particularly dense vegetation. No signs of struggle, no indication of external interference, no trace of their missing team member. It was as if Hunter Prime had simply decided to cease existing at that precise location. Equipment malfunction, the Alpha announced, though his enhanced analytical systems were suggesting probability percentages that he found increasingly uncomfortable. Continue the minutes later, pack member designation Stalker Secondary similarly vanished from their neural network. Then Hunter Tish. Each disappearance followed the same pattern, active biosignatures followed by communication silence, with no environmental evidence to suggest external interference. The Alpha's enhanced cognitive processes began running increasingly frantic diagnostic routines, searching for technical explanations that could account for their systematic losses. Equipment failures, atmospheric interference, preserve malfunction, anything except the growing possibility that their primitive prey had somehow turned the tables on apex predators. Status report, he demanded from his 2 remaining pack members, though his voice had acquired the sort of tight control that suggested cracks forming in previously unshakable confidence. No contact with missing units, came the reply. No trace signatures, no response to emergency frequencies. It's as if they simply stopped. The Alpha's enhanced senses suddenly registered something that sent alarm cascades through his modified nervous system. The preserve had become unnaturally quiet, with none of the ambient noise that should characterize a functioning ecosystem. Even the indigenous wildlife seemed to have gone silent, as if something had fundamentally altered the environmental balance. More disturbing still, he was beginning to suspect that they were no longer tracking their prey. The mounting evidence suggested an impossible conclusion, that somehow, despite every law of predator-prey dynamics, they had become the hunt. His enhanced hearing detected the soft crackle of the communication system, activating, followed by a voice that carried altogether too much calm satisfaction for comfort. "Still there?" the human asked, "because I'm having trouble keeping track of how many of you are left." Part 4. The pack crumbles. The Alpha's enhanced vocal cords produced a sound that his species linguists would later classify as the auditory equivalent of a stellar collapse. Part roar, part scream, and entirely devoid of the sophisticated menace that had previously characterized his communication. His remaining pack members shared his mounting horror through their neural link, their collective consciousness fracturing under the weight of a reality that defied every fundamental principle of galactic predator hierarchy. "What did you do to?" he demanded, his voice carrying harmonics of rage that registered across several dimensional frequencies. The human's response arrived with the sort of casual cheerfulness typically associated with discussing weekend recreational activities. "Oh, they're fine. Their pride might need some medical attention, but physically, This information should have been reassuring, except for the growing realization that somehow being systematically outmaneuvered by what the galaxy considered a prey species was infinitely more humiliating than simple death. The Alpha's enhanced cognitive processes began running damage assessment protocols, calculating the long-term implications for Kytharan reputation across known space. "Impossible," he stated, though his conviction was developing cracks that no amount of bio-augmentation could repair. Humans lacked the genetic modifications necessary for advanced combat techniques. "You know what?" the human replied, her tone suggesting someone about to share an amusing observation. "You keep mentioning these genetic modifications, like there's some sort of magical advantage. But here's the thing about modifications. They make you predictable." The Alpha's remaining pack members began reporting increasingly disturbing tactical assessments through their neural link. Their enhanced senses, designed to provide overwhelming advantages in any hunting scenario, were somehow being systematically exploited. Every strength had become a weakness, every advantage transformed into a vulnerability. "Your bioscanners look for heat signatures, so I used thermal dampening techniques from basic survival training," the human continued, her voice seeming to emanate from multiple directions simultaneously. "Your motion sensors detect standard movement patterns, so I move differently. Your enhanced hearing picks up normal sounds, so I made abnormal ones." The Alpha's optical implants frantically scanned the preserve, searching for any visual confirmation of his target's location. Instead, he found himself looking at his own pack members, who were emerging from various hiding spots with expressions of profound confusion and what appeared to be severe psychological trauma. "Your neural link is fascinating, by the way," the human added, conversation very efficient for coordination, "but it also means that when one of you gets confused, it spreads through your entire network. Basic psychological warfare. Create uncertainty in your opponents, then let their own systems amplify it." The Alpha watched his legendary hunters stumble through the preserve like confused tourists, their enhanced modifications rendered useless by tactics so primitive that military academies would have dismissed them as historical curiosity. Hunter Prime appeared to be attempting to hide behind vegetation, insufficient to conceal a small child, while Stalker Secondary was frantically scanning empty air with equipment that should have detected targets across multiple star systems. "Where are you?" the Alpha roared, his voice triggering avalanche warnings from the preserve's safety systems. "Right here," the human replied. She stepped out from behind a tree that couldn't possibly have provided adequate concealment, except that she had somehow been invisible despite standing in plain sight. Her appearance was exactly as unremarkable as it had been in the Cantina. No advanced camouflage technology, no exotic modifications, nothing more sophisticated than basic clothing and an expression of mild amusement. But how? The Alpha began, his enhanced analytical systems, struggling to process information that contradicted every established principle of tactical superiority. "Military special forces," the human explained helpfully. 23 years active duty, specializing in asymmetric warfare against technologically superior opponents. Turns out that when your species spends centuries modifying yourselves for hunting, you forget how to deal with someone who actually fights back. The Alpha's worldview underwent what philosophers would later term catastrophic paradigm collapse. Here was a creature with no enhanced reflexes, no improved sensory organs, no genetic modifications whatsoever, yet she had systematically dismantled the galaxy's most feared hunting pack using techniques so basic that they predated interstellar travel.
"The fundamental problem with your approach," the human continued, apparently enjoying what had become an impromptu lecture on tactical theory. Is that you think like predators hunting prey. But humans aren't prey. We're persistence hunters, who developed intelligence, specifically to overcome physically superior opponents. The preserve's communication system crackled with incoming transmissions from the Cantina, where the betting pools had apparently achieved some sort of mathematical impossibility that was causing several artificial intelligences to request emergency repair. This is impossible, the Alpha repeated, though his voice had lost all traces of its former menace, and now carried the hollow quality of someone whose fundamental understanding of reality had just been systematically demolished. No, the human corrected gently. This is Tuesday. The return to the Cantina proceeded with all the festive atmosphere of a funeral march. If funeral marches typically featured bewildered apex predators being escorted by cheerfully humming humans, the Alpha's pack shuffled through the establishment's entrance like defeated gladiators, their enhanced modifications somehow making their humiliation more pronounced rather than less. The Cantina's patrons greeted their return with the sort of stunned silence, typically reserved for witnessing impossible phenomena, or extremely poor taste in entertainment choices. Several species that had never agreed on anything in recorded history found themselves united in shocked disbelief. Well, the human announced to the assembled crowd, settling back into her original booth with her drink apparently refilled. That was refreshing. Anyone else want to demonstrate galactic superiority? The silence stretched until it achieved gravitational significance, broken only by the soft sounds of bets being settled and worldviews being hastily recalibrated. The Alpha stood in the center of the Cantina, his legendary reputation dissolving like sugar in acid rain, while the rest of the galaxy's predatory species quietly re-evaluated their assumptions about cosmic food chains. Within standard galactic time unit, emergency diplomatic communications were racing across civilized space, carrying a single urgent message that would reshape interspecies relations for generations to come. Add humans to the do not hunt list immediately, and suggest everyone else might want to reconsider their hobby. The universe, it seemed, had just discovered that sometimes the most dangerous prey was the kind that refused to acknowledge it was supposed to be prey at all. And somewhere in a cantina on Nexus Station, a human finished her drink and wondered what all the fuss was about.